So I guess here I go, take it away. Thanks for that introduction, Kathleen. Yeah, so that's who I am, a fiber artist, and I've been, a member of SAQA for decades now. I mean, it's just, and it's such a fantastic group, I love it. And like I said, like Kathleen said, I grew up in Canada and I live in LA now. And I just like totally love everything to do with fabric. So I dye my own fabrics. I do surface design. I do art quilts. I do wall hangings. I do, whatever I can do that is going to service whatever technique is going to service the piece that I'm working on. So I've been teaching at Center for the Arts in Eagle Rock here in Los Angeles. And there's a workshop coming up. It's called Block Printing and Stitching on Fabric. And that workshop starts next Sunday. And there's still, I think, 2 spots left in the class if anybody wants to take it. If there's interest, I will teach it again. So, so if you're interested and we have enough people, enough students, then I will obviously teach it again. So what we're going to do today, what I'd like to do today is I'm going to start off with a slideshow to sort of give you, I'm going to give you an introduction to the class and sort of go through a condensed version of the class and demo a few things. So we're going to start with the slideshow so that I can go through the process of block printing and stitching. And then I'll do some real demos. I'll demo carving a block, I'll demo printing on a block, and then also some stitching. So that's what we're going to do today. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to share my screen and start with this. Let me just get it bigger. And slideshow. Okay, so here we go. Block printing and stitching on fabric. That's me, Connie Rohman. Some of you know me already. So this first slide is a sample of what we'll be doing in the class. This is block printed, and you can see these 3 circles are my block, and I printed them in different colors and then came back in and stitched on it. Here's a detail. You can see this is a buttonhole stitch. There's cross stitch, buttonhole, that's a chain stitch, a variation of a chain stitch, and that's a chevron stitch. And this is a variation on the seed stitch. So this is just to give you an idea of the sorts of things that we will be doing in the class, is printing and then coming back in and stitching on things. Here's another sample. You can see over here, it's the same block, I just printed it in different colors. And then in this one, that's a back stitch with gold thread. And then here it's like a double back stitch with the pink. This is a leaf stitch. And over here, I've got a satin stitch. That's a stem stitch around the outside of the leaf. And then there's a chain stitch in the middle. So this kind of gives you an idea of the different, how you can make it look different by using different stitching techniques and different stitches on top of the block print. Here's another one. And what I kind of liked about this was printing the 3 different blocks and then just doing the embroidery on one and sort of leaving these just the simple, just straight block. I think that's kind of an interesting look. And that's a chain stitch and a stem stitch. Again, here's the same block with different colors on it. You'll see these, I don't know if any of you are familiar with block printing or if you've done it in the past. I'm just going to pretend like you all are beginners. So this is, you can see like these extra little lines here. And that's where I didn't carve the block all the way down and left some of these lines just because it happened. But I like the texture that it brings. I think it brings a little extra detail and some extra texture to it. So I just left them because I kind of like that. But if you want to, you can carve your block all the way flat so that all you see is the main image. I threw this in because I thought it might be interesting to show you, you can use your blocks like this. You can print off fabric like this and use it to make pillows or whatever you want. And the other idea I had that I thought might be interesting was to maybe take one of the motifs and to stitch on it, you know, up in the corner, or maybe take, you know, 3 motifs scattered around the pillow surface and stitch on it. And that would add an extra detail that would really pop if you were going to make it into a pillow. This is the supply kit that you get if you take the class. And it's the supplies that you would need to do this, this surface technique. So I'm just going to run through, I'm going to run through the supplies that you would need. Starting out with your block. This is a Speedy Carve block by Speedball. And I like to use these because they're soft and they're easy to carve into. And they're quick and easy, and you can get them on Amazon, or you can get them at any art supply store. Dharma Trading, if any of you know Dharma Trading, carries them. This is your carving tool, and it comes with an extra speedy block that you can use to carve with. This is what the tool looks like, and I'll show you that and how to use it. This is an inking plate, which you can get to, you know, you spread out your paint on, and you can use this. You can buy them. I think I got these from Dharma Trading. Also, you can use just a simple piece of glass, and I'll show you that later. This is your inks, and when you're printing on fabric, you want to use an ink that is specifically for fabric. So here it says fabric, block printing ink. And I like Speedball. I think Speedball inks are a nice, smooth consistency, and I've had really good luck with using them for printing. So you can print with, you could also try printing with fabric paints, anything that's the right consistency to print with. But my preference is to use Speedball inks. And the other reason I like them is that you can mix the colors really well with them very easily. You know, you can add white to lighten something up, or you can darken it, or you can, you know, make it a particular shade of green if you want to. So the colors mix really nicely with Speedball. Let's see, here's your brayer, which you'll use to spread the paint out onto your block with. And then, of course, your fabric. When I'm printing on fabric, I like to use either a Pima cotton or a Kona cotton. And I get both of those by the roll from Dharma Trading. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dharma Trading. It's dharmatrading.com, and they're an online service that has fabric and inks and dyes, and they're just fantastic. So I use the 2 different types of fabric. Pima cotton is woven tighter, and so it will give you a crisper print of your block. Kona cotton is a looser weave. It's not real loose, but it's looser than the Pima, and it gives kind of a more organic look to the block. It's not as crisp and sharp, but it's more sort of organic. And I find that it's easier to stitch into the Kona cotton. So if I know I'm going to be stitching something, I'll use Kona. So both cottons are really good to use, and they both come prepared for dyeing if you get them from Dharma. And so you don't really have to do much except just use them. So that's your fabric. And then I have needle threaders, because if you're old like me and you can't see to thread the needle, these things are fantastic to help you do that with. Then you have your embroidery needles. And I use Bohin needles. It's Bohin, and they're my favorite embroidery needles to use. This is an assorted pack of assorted sizes of embroidery needles. And I just really like the quality of these needles. You can find them pretty much anywhere, online or whatever. Your embroidery hoop. Down here is tracing paper. That's to trace your design onto your block, and we'll be talking about that. And then over here is embroidery threads. And these threads that I put in the kit for people, these are Le Paon threads. It's L-E, and then the next word is P-A-O-N. And you can get them online. I think I got these on Amazon. And I like to use them. The reason is that they have a very matte finish to them. DMC embroidery floss, which a lot of people use and I use also, is a little bit shinier. So if I want something that's very matte, I'll go to Le Payon. If I want something that's a little brighter or shinier, I'll stick with DMC. So, so those are the supplies that you would need if you're going to do this at home. And oh, as I'm going, if anybody has any questions, just I guess just unmute yourself and ask me, and I can answer, or maybe put it in the chat. And Kathleen, if you see anything in the chat, you can let me know if somebody has a question. So now we're going to talk about designing your block. So first off, if you feel comfortable drawing your own design, fantastic. That's great. Just draw your own design. You want to make sure that you've got shapes to deal with rather than lines, because that'll be easier to carve. So yeah, go ahead and make your own design if you want to. If you're looking for some ideas of what to carve and what kind of an image you want to do, go to stock images. You know, just Google stock images, and then you'll get like all these free things, and you can like narrow your search down. Like this is leaves. I just Googled leaves and came up with this. And then you can use something like this as inspiration for drawing your block. You can either use the actual image if it's copyright free, or you can use it to tweak it and draw your own design. If you're going to use something like these leaves, you have to be careful though that your lines are thick enough that you can carve around them. So it's best if you start with something that's shapes like this or like this horse. If you are going to have lines, just make them thick enough so that you can carve around them. Thin little lines are really hard to carve. So just keep that in mind as you're designing your blocks. Okay, so I decided to go with this dollop horse. This is a traditional Swedish image, and I just wanted to go use the outline of the horse. And so basically, one thing to know when you're designing your block is that your image is going to be the reverse when you print it. So for example, this horse is facing towards the left, and if I was to print it like that, it would be facing towards the right. Okay, so I need to flip my image if I want it to still remain facing to the left. This is particularly true of letters. If you're going to carve something that has words in it, you have to carve it backwards so that when you flip it over to print it, it will print the correct way. So that's something to remember as you're designing your block. So the next thing you do is, if you have tracing paper, you can just put your tracing paper down on the top of your pink block, and then the tracing paper face down, and then put your design on top of that and trace it. Okay, but we don't always have tracing paper available. I don't always have tracing paper available. So this is a method that you can use if you don't have it. Which is you take your design and your image, excuse me, and you just go over it with a pencil all the way around the lines that you want to carve out. So you're basically putting lead down on the line that you're going to trace. So this is partially done. Here's, I went over the whole outline because that's what I'm going to use, and smushed it with pencil lines. And then I turned the image upside down. So the pencil lines are underneath here. And this is how I traced it onto the block. Okay. So then here's the block with the pencil line on it. And you can see it works pretty well. You can really get a nice line with it. The only problem is it's smudgy, because the pencil lead will smudge on the block. So what I do is then I come in with a ballpoint pen and I just trace the pencil line with the ballpoint. And that way I won't lose my line as I'm carving. So this is carving, carving a block. And basically it's pretty easy. You start with going around the outside of your lines with the smallest V-shaped carver. And I'll get into that because I'm going to demo this for you. This is just to show you how I hold it and just to give you an idea of how you're going to carve it. Here's a block that I carved, and you saw this image earlier. You can see all these lines outside the image. That's where I carved the block down below the level of the image. Because what you want is you want only your image to be raised up, because that's what's going to print. Now, like I told you about in the lines earlier that are left, some of these lines are high enough that they might print a little bit, and I don't mind that. So that's an example of a carved block. Here's my setup at home that I use when I'm printing. Basically, you cover everything with newspaper, and you wear something that you don't care about if it's going to get ink on it. And I've got newspaper, and then I've got a bunch of newspapers underneath my fabric because I want to give it a little bit of a cushion to press into when I'm printing, so that it takes the print really nicely. So I just pile up the newspapers. I collect them for a couple of days. Here's the blocks. There's my ink, my brayer. I use these little tongue depressors to get the ink out. And here's my homemade inking plate, which is a piece of glass taken from a very cheap frame from, Michael's or whatever. And I just taped the edges of the glass so that I wouldn't cut myself. You want to do that if you're going to use this. And then you just put your ink on there and wash it off when you're done, and it's fine. If I've sometimes used these for a long period of time and I keep washing them, and the tape will come off, but then you just retape it. So that's the setup, how you want to do it at home. And this is picking colors after the block prints are done. Once you print the block, then you want to let it cure for a couple hours, best overnight. That means the fabric inks will sink down into the fibers and cure. And once you've left it for a period of time, I usually just leave mine overnight and then, don't have to worry about it. If you're in a rush, I think an hour or two is the minimum you can do. So once it's cured and dried, completely dried, then you take it to your iron and you iron it with no steam on the front and the back, and that will set the inks so that they'll be permanent. And then you can wash these. I would wash them on cool water and, either air dry them or put them on a low dryer. But I have never had any problem with them washing out. So this is picking colors here, and these are DMC embroidery floss too, but they're a very shiny floss. And I like these, but they're hard to work with because they tend to knot up and get tangled up pretty easily. But if you want that really iridescent sort of shiny look, you can get these at Joann's just with the other DMC embroidery threads. Okay. And here's more picking colors. I just wanted to talk about choosing colors for a second. When you're looking for colors to stitch with, I like to have a variety of colors, and I like to have colors that sort of work with but are not quite the color that I'm going over. So for example, this is actually quite a pink here, but when you put it on the orange, it looks much more orangey, but it's a pink. And this is a very gold, but again, it works on the orange. And then also remember to have different values, a lighter value and darker values that give you contrast. So that's just an idea of picking colors for, and you can go, like these are similar colors to what I printed. You can go a totally opposite way and, you know, pick blues and yellows and purple, whatever that are different. It's all up to you and what you like. This is a piece that I printed that I'm working on stitching, and I'll do a demo of this later with this piece and just show you how I come in and do the stitching. This is a very large wonky back stitch. I think I used a very thin pearl cotton for that. And then this is a stem stitch and chain stitch over here, and we'll go over this. Oh, one thing I wanted to point out in case I forget to talk about it later is when you're printing on your fabric, and I will say this because I have learned the hard way and you'll see it here, is make sure that you have enough fabric left around your image so that you can, oops, what did I do? Go back. Make sure you have enough fabric around your image so that you can put your embroidery hoop over it. See down here, I didn't leave enough fabric and I have that little piece sticking out on the bottom, which is, you know, then you can't quite get it centered in your hoop tight enough to really stitch nicely with. So that's just a little tip. Remember to leave enough fabric around your image when you're printing it. Okay, so this is Center for the Arts Eagle Rock. And in case any of you guys do decide you want to take the class, this is how to get involved with it. You want to probably go to their Instagram, which is @ and it's all spelled out, Center for the Arts Eagle Rock. Okay, and then if you have questions, you can go to info@cfaer.org and they'll get back to you and let you know if there's spaces left in the class or not. So that's how to get a hold of the class if you want to take it. And then here's my information. That's my Instagram @CRohman1. And then my email, in case you want to like shout out at me, is crohman1@yahoo.com. And like I said earlier, I love fabric and I love everything having to do with it. So if any of you want to talk about that or you have any questions in the future about any of this stuff, just feel totally free to, you know, shoot me an email. And then my website is my name, ConnieRohman.com, and you can go on and see the, you know, the work that I do if you want to. So that's the slideshow. And now we get to do the fun part. Now we get to do the demos. So let me see, what am I going to do first? First off, we're going to do the carving the block. So I got to get set up here. Just bear with me for a second. I'll get this. I had to turn off my phone because it was low on batteries, but I think this should be good. Okay, and let me make sure that I can get this. Yes, okay, so here we go. Just got to get this adjusted so that you can see what I'm doing. Wait. Okay, so basically, I want to start off by talking about, this is your tool. And so there it is. And basically it comes like this. And what it has is it has all of the, in the handle, you unscrew the handle and all of the carving nibs are in here. So you've got wide ones, more narrow ones. This little rounded one here is for cutting. It's kind of like an X-Acto knife. So this comes with your cutting tool. And you just screw it back on. And then to put one of the nibs in, I keep gotta get in the right place here so you can see what I'm doing. You basically just unscrew this. It's like doing a screwdriver. And there's one edge of the nib that is sharp, that has more of a V shape, and that's the cutting edge. And then there's one edge that is rounded and dull, and that's the edge that you stick. There's a sort of half circle in there. You stick it in all the way down and then screw it back in. And boom, there you have it. Okay. All right. So when you're carving, what you want to do is you want to start on the outside of your line. Okay. And what I do is I use a skinny one. Let's see if you can see, with a sharp V on it. I use one of the skinniest ones to go around first. And as you're carving, I hold it in my hand with my finger down, just sort of like that. And you always carve away from yourself so that you're not carving towards yourself, you don't jab yourself, and you're always carving away from yourself. So you just go down in and gently carve away from yourself. And there you go, okay? And the other tip about carving a block is, instead of turning your hand to go around it, I turn the block. So that'll really help with going away from yourself, and it also helps with carving. So you'll see that I have already gone around the outside of the image here. And now I'm just taking the larger cutter and I'm going around the block. And see, as I go around, I'm turning the block. As you need to. If you don't need to, you don't have to, but like here, I'm going to turn it. So you just go all the way around and you keep going around. And the idea here is that you're carving the block down everywhere you don't want your image to be, okay? And I don't know if you can see, but that is a much wider carve than the first one. And that'll just make this carving go a lot faster as you're carving it. So basically, just like this. Okay, so that's carving a block. And in the class, you're going to be doing this yourselves. It's not just going to be me showing, it's going to be everybody for themselves carving their blocks and getting their blocks ready to print. One thing I want to say about carving a block is, look at all this extra space on outside of the image. That you don't need that. You can keep it if you want to. You can, carve your block down to the edges if you want to, but you don't need it. And I'll show you what I mean. With this block, I kept the edges. I just carved all the way out to the edges of the block because the image takes up most of the block anyways. So I just thought, okay, that's fine. I'll just keep it like that, okay? With this block, it was a smaller image. So what I did was, after you carve this down, then it's thin enough that you can actually take a pair of scissors and cut around the outside. And you want to leave some space, like at least ½ an inch from the outside of your design to the edge of the block. But you can cut the waste off. And one of the things that this does for you is it kind of gives you a guide of the shape of the block so that when you're printing it, you can kind of go, oh, okay, so that's where the two flowers are, and that's where the top flower is. And you can use it to orient your block on the fabric if you want to. So like, for example, I know that straight edge is the bottom of the image. So if I flipped it over, that's the straight edge is the bottom of the image. So that's a way that, you know, you can choose to either carve off pieces of your block, or you can keep it square. Either way works fine. Okay. So just go back to the other camera here. Okay, so that's block printing. If anybody has any questions about that, you know, feel free to just dive in and ask me. Okay. All right, we're gonna go to printing now. So I'm gonna have to like switch the camera around and get that going. And I'm gonna demo printing. Okay, so you can see me okay with this. All right, so when you're printing or when I'm painting on fabric or printing on fabric, I always wear my, well, I don't always, but I'm just doing this the right way for you guys. Get a smock or wear clothing that you don't care if it gets the ink on it or paint on it, just because, well, we've all had that happen where you're like, oh, I'm just gonna, you know, print this and then I'll be really careful, and then it's like, whoops. Okay, so basically here I have the setup. I've got my inking plate. I've got my fabric laid out on some layers of newspaper. I've got my inks ready to go. I have my brayer here. I have paper towels in case I make a mess. And I'm just doing this on my dining room table, as you can see. So we're just going to dive in and pick a color. I'm going to do red. Oops. Oh, this is the Speedball printing inks for fabric. And like I said, I use these tongue depressors to get my paint out onto the inking plate. So you just take a little bit of the ink. It doesn't take a whole lot. Maybe a little bit more than that. And you know, you can do all kinds of things. You can mix your colors on the plate. You can mix your colors before. You can use the colors straight out of the bin. You can buy, you know, I think Speedball has all different colors that you can buy pre-mixed that you can use if you don't want to mix your own colors. Okay, so here, let's see. I've got the ink on a line at the top of my plate, and then I'm going to take the brayer and just ink up the brayer, and it's just, you just go back and forth. And basically what you want to do is you want to get a layer of paint evenly distributed on the brayer. Okay, and it'll actually have like a little bit of a tacky sound as you pick it up. You can't probably hear that, but basically, okay. And then you grab your block. I'm going to use this block. And you just do it nice and level. You just go over the block with your, and you want to make sure that you've got a nice layer on the block, but you don't want to do too much ink because then you'll get it down into the cracks of where you've carved out. So just a nice, you'll get used to it if you know, and every time I print, I do a couple of waste prints at the first, just to kind of get used to, again, how much ink to put on my block as I do it. So then you take the block and you just turn it over, put it where you want it. And then, this is the very technical part, you press down really hard. So that you press down all over the entire surface of the block so that you're getting the ink all evenly pressed down into the fabric. And then just once you've got that all done, et voila. And there you have it. There's your print. So look at how easy that was. That was so easy. I'm going to do another print just because I have the ink here and I might as well use it up. I'm just going to, this is going to be a lighter print because I don't have quite as much ink left on the brayer. But it should do something, and it might do an interesting ghost print. We'll see. Oops. Okay, again, turn it over, place it where you want it to be. And in the class, we'll talk also about, you know, registering and how to print so that it's like, if you want to have it look like fabric where it's all printed evenly, or you want to have it spaced out in a certain kind of way, there's tricks to doing that. So pushing, getting this puppy all the way down because there's not as much ink on it. And then we'll see what it looks like. Well, that's not bad. So there you have it. And look at how fast and quick that is. And you can do like a bunch of these and, you know, and then you can print up, you know, enough to use as yardage for something. You can use it, you know, one-off prints if you're going to stitch onto it. There's just all different kinds of ways that you can use this. And then the other thing is you clean up with soap and water. So all of this just cleans up with soap and water, and you want to wash this off pretty quickly after you use it. I'm just going to use a paper towel right now because you want to keep it from the paint drying on it and getting to, and then coming off later. But basically, you know what, I'm just going to take this over to the sink really quick while I'm doing this. Bear with me for a second. Okay, that's good enough. You just basically want to get that off, and then I'll rinse off the brayer and the plate later. So that's block printing, you guys. That's it. So easy. Okay, now we're going to come back over here. Okay, so that was fun. Fun for me, not for you guys, but fun for me. Now, the last demo I'm going to do is stitching. Okay, so this is that piece that I'm stitching on. You can see it there. And I'm going to switch my camera on so you can see what I'm doing. Somebody just gave me this and I'm still figuring out how to use it, but it's really cool because then you can see close-ups. Okay. So basically, let me see if I can get this adjusted better. I don't know. I always have to figure out where I'm going to get it in the camera. Okay, so this is basically, I'm sure that all of you know, or a lot of you have done embroidery in the past. In this class, I teach basic stitches so that, you know, because I'm assuming that none of the people that have taken my classes at the center necessarily know how to do this. But I also go through more, it depends on the level of people in the class. Sometimes I'll go through more complicated stitches and teach some more interesting stitches, but I start with the basics. And this is a stem stitch along here with a couple of little daisy stitches on the leaves. And then this, I'm just doing a chain stitch. Now, when you're using embroidery thread, it comes embroidery floss comes with 6 strands. So you cut a piece and then you can separate it out to however many strands, however thick you want your stitched line to look. I tend to use 3 strands at a time just because I like that thickness, but you can use 6, you can use 1, you can use however many you want. I also stitch with a thimble. I was brought up sewing that way, and I really find that it really helps with my finger when I'm pushing the needle through. And I just really like working with a thimble. If you haven't tried one, I would really recommend trying one. I hold it, I put it on my middle finger, and then as I go down and I come up, I use it to push the needle through. And that really saves my fingers. So this is what did I do there? I did something funky. This is a chain stitch. And I don't know what happened. Something happened there. Of course, because I'm trying to show you guys on camera. Of course, something funky happens. There we go. So basically, to do a chain stitch, you go down in the stitch before and you come up a stitch length away, wrap your thread around the needle, push it through. Oops, I don't even know if you guys can see that. And that's a chain stitch. Okay. So that is, and there are so many different ways that you can stitch onto fabric and stitch onto these block prints. It's a really interesting way to work, I found, because you can print off a bunch of the prints and then just have a lot of fun with doing each one really differently and using different stitches and just really experimenting with stitching onto something. And then in the end, you have something that's really unique that is yours, and you can frame them, you can use them for whatever you want. So I'm going to switch back to the other camera here. Okay. All right. Well, that's basically the demos that I had and the talking that I had. So I guess that if you guys want to, we can open it up for questions or comments or anything. If anybody has anything they want to ask or talk about.
Well, I think that's fascinating, everything you've shown us, Connie. I have block printed a long time ago, but I've forgotten all those little tricks. A couple things came to my mind. When you're doing the embroidery, sometimes you're using a different color thread, even though your print is all one color. Have you tried printing with different colors on the same block?
Yes, and that's something that you can do. And as a more advanced thing, you basically would take, like if I wanted to do a leaf and a flower, I would carve the stem and the leaves, and then I would carve the flower. And then you print the stem and the leaves, and then you print the flower on that with a different color. So that's one way that you can do 2 colors. The other way is that you can roll the ink onto one block if you're very careful without mushing it into the, like the leaf part, or, that way. But it's a cleaner thing if you carve 2 blocks, carve a block for each color that you want to use in your design.
Mm-hmm.
So,
does anybody else have any questions? Well, one of the things that you were talking about using inks, and have you ever tried it with acrylic paint or any other medium besides?
Yeah. Yeah, no, you can use acrylic paints. Again, I like the inks because there's no hand to the fabric when you've done it. And, so that it's not stiff. Acrylic paints tends to stiffen things. Mm-hmm. But if you don't mind that, and it would be harder to stitch through because it's plastic. acrylic paints are plasticky. So it'd be harder to stitch through, but it certainly totally works really fine as a, with block printing.
Okay, I have a friend who sends me a Christmas card every year that she block printed.
Yeah, and this method of block printing, you can use it on paper, absolutely, and you can use acrylic paints or anything on paper, and boom, you're good to go.
The inks is more like a dye that actually becomes part of your fabric, and it doesn't make it stiff or anything when you're talking about the hand.
Yeah, that exactly. Yeah.
All right. I did put your those Instagrams and website things on the chat if anyone wants to look there. I hope I got them spelled right. Somebody said, Connie, great demo. Clear. I enjoyed seeing how much you add stitch to the printing piece. Love it. That was from Ricky.
Thanks, Ricky.
Yeah, but I don't know. I can't imagine that nobody has any questions. I must have a few questions. You're just so thorough.
I tell you. And, the class is just really nice opportunity to, the thing that I love about teaching, and I taught for years at the center before the pandemic. And that was really, really great because it's hands-on and I can just walk around the room and people can show me things, and there's nothing like teaching in person. But I will say that doing it on Zoom is a completely different feeling. And it's just been really nice to come together on Sundays and have like a couple of hours that people are just playing, and and you can see and just talk online, and and you can get close up, and it's just a really nice opportunity. The thing with the classes at the center is that you get all the supplies, so you don't need to run out and do anything. It's all delivered to you, and then you get to just play. So it's been really successful, and really actually a lot of fun to do the Zoom classes online. So
well, the also nice thing is that you don't have to be in the LA area. You can take it from anywhere. Yeah,
and in that case, then you would have to like sign up right away so that we could somehow get your supplies mailed to you. We had that happen once, where it was somebody up in, I think, Portland that took it. But she told us right away, so we had time enough to get the supplies mailed up to her.
All right, let's see. Somebody says your palette looked like something from an office supply store. Looks like a handy idea. Did I read that right?
My palette looked like from an office supply store?
Oh, I know what she's talking about. You showed us the glass plate, that you put your, but you were using this other thing, which actually what I was thinking is, I have a plastic one like that you can put your book on and it'll hold your book.
Yeah, and you can use anything that is a surface that you can wash off afterwards. What I was using is an actual inking plate for block printing, and I think I got them from Dharma Trading. I'm not sure, but you can really, like I said, you can use the glass. You can use a thing that you put your book on. Anything that gives you a flat surface that you can roll the brayer on and the ink on and wash off afterwards.
Great. And another question, let's see, somebody said, every question I wrote down, you answered before I sent it.
Excellent.
Before she sent it, and actually that happened to me too when you were talking about letting the ink dry, preferably overnight. And I was thinking, well, do you have to heat set it? And then you said, and then you take an iron. I mean, you really answered all the questions. You really very precise and thorough.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I try and break it down to steps that I would do, and I have to think ahead of time. Okay, what do I do, and why do I do it? So.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing when you have to write things down too, because you can't skip a step. You try to follow your own instructions. So, anybody else? Any more questions? We still have a few more minutes before our hour is over with.
Yeah, that went by really quick.
Do you have anything on your website that shows things you've made with the block printing. I sort of scanned it really quickly and it showed different, like your language series and
Yeah, you know, I am ashamed to say I have to update my website. I'm working on it, but I have a whole lot of new work that I haven't posted that needs to get up on there. So I don't think that there's any samples of the block printing on my website yet.
Okay, and
Stay tuned.
Okay, good. And do you post, like, do you have a calendar or something on your website that shows where you're going to be teaching next and how to get in touch with that?
Yeah, you know, the best way to find out what I'm teaching is follow me on Instagram, because that's like just very instant, and I just put stuff up whenever I'm teaching. I don't always get it up on my website, but I always put it on Instagram. So if you follow me on that, you'll see when I'm teaching.
And that was AC Roman 1 at C Roman 1. Okay.
Yeah.
And I put that in the chat for anybody, if you know, I put them, all those, whatever you call them, handles on the chat. So if you cut and paste that into your own computer somewhere, everybody will have that information for easy access. Well, I've just really enjoyed this.